I think HR is designed to lead the people needs of the business.
Hi, it's John Bernatovicz, your host of the HR Like a Boss podcast. Welcome to Season 3. I've embarked on a journey to get to know amazingly awesome HR and business professionals with the hope of finding what it takes to do HR like a boss. If you like the show, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. On today's episode, cannot tell you how excited I am to have Frank Zupan. I've gotten to know him over the years, and I'm super excited to have him on the HR Like a Boss podcast. So Frank, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me, John. I appreciate the opportunity.
How would you describe the purpose? So the reason why we do HR, what is your perspective on that, Frank?
Well, within a corporate structure, I think HR is designed to lead the people needs of the business, and that's really multifaceted. So there's people needs internal to the business, there's regulatory and compliance needs typically around how you manage and how you pay people. There's business needs of how you attract and acquire the people that you need to run the business. So I tend to think of HR kind of from a high level of really needing to lead the people side of the business, whatever that is, because that can progress from very small businesses of 10, 20, 30 people who might not have a full-time HR person to 10, 20, 30,000 employee companies who have massive HR teams. I don't think the overall high level purpose changes. It's we have to be mindful of the needs of the business when we have to be mindful of the needs of the people. So if you can be mindful of those things, I think you can do pretty well in HR.
Why do you think some HR professionals dislike recruiting so much?
Well, it might be similar to their aversion to taking a sales job too. They might say, "I'll do anything but sales." And I get that. If they don't enjoy the work, then by golly, don't do the work. Do something else. But if you enjoy the results-driven, very measurable type of activity that recruiting is in almost all environments, then go do that or do part of that and do part of another. You can learn how to do recruiting and learn how to do those things while you're still driving towards a different career objective within the larger HR kind of system. And I've seen successful HR people do that. Successful HR leaders take a rotation for a year or two through TA. And I think that can be highly valuable because I think they can understand the needs of their business clients out throughout the business a little bit more intimately than if they're just doing, let's say, compensation work, or if they're just doing HR generalist or the compliance type work. They may only understand those problems, but typically TA gets a look at the larger scope of problems of why people are needed, why people are leaving, why people don't want to come in, those types of things. So it's a good experience, but by all means, if somebody's not interested in it, they shouldn't be pushed into it. That's for sure.
From your perspective, that impact of the Great Resignation, and probably more importantly for our listeners, some strategies on ways that they can combat, leverage it, take it as an opportunity. I'm just so curious to hear your perspective on this.
This is a time where business leaders need to really understand and be able to communicate amongst their leadership teams what the priorities are and how they're going to go out and really execute on those priorities, because if they involve access to people, access to talent, access to certain areas, regions, demographies, they have to be really, really tight internally to communicate what those needs are going to be, because you can't have a certain part of business leaders going off in one direction and then have your people side of the business not aware of what. And I've seen that happen. It can be problematic. It can really create some short-term, mid-term, and long-term challenges in the business when that happens. So I think that the number one solution for organizations is to absolutely have great leadership communication around what the priorities are and how the different stakeholders are going to execute on those priorities. Absolutely key.
You've used the word leadership several times on the show so far, Frank, and I'm just so curious to get any of the suggestions that you have at how HR can support an organization's leadership and managers to develop them into being really effective at what they do.
Yeah, that's the 99-cent question. Always is, because I think a lot of organizations do struggle with that. And there's various reasons for it. An organization can typically have, for a first line manager opening that comes up, your typical reaction is to look across your top contributing individual contributors, your highest performers. Hey, if I'm looking for a sales manager because a sales manager just left my organization, the very first thing is to typically look across the sales organization for high contributors. But that's got nothing to do with the competencies of how to manage and lead other people. And that's where it becomes dangerous, because there's difficulty in assessing what those competencies are. And I think some companies do it better than others, but I think it's highly cultural. It's not standardized. What works at one company doesn't work at another company. And that's something that hiring managers really need to get a hold of. Man, if hiring managers can get a hold of that and understand that a high performer at company A is not necessarily going to be a high performer at my company. There's a different environment, there's a different culture, there's different tools in place, there's a different relationship set that they may have with their leadership team. There's so many different contingencies on that equation that it's not automatic. And I think really companies tend to rely on past experience and high result past experience, maybe too much, in how they recruit for positions in their own environment, because it doesn't always translate. In fact, there's lots of instances where it simply doesn't translate. It doesn't come over and make that person an all-star over here. So having an understanding of the cultural aspects of success is really important.
How would you describe someone that does HR like a boss?
Doing HR like a boss has to be bringing along other leaders and leaving the place better than you found it. I've always said that if you can leave an organization, a team, a department, a company better than you found it, you're a good boss. You're doing okay.
Frank, I had a great time. I learned a few things along the way, as I usually do. I hope you enjoyed your time on the HR Like a Boss podcast.
I did, man. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you for listening to the HR Like a Boss podcast. If it resonates with you, please leave a rating or review, or better yet, subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, let's continue to aspire to do amazingly awesome HR.